Chapter 4. The cell walls were black as night. Cold, pure, freezing cold. He had no choice but to lie on the floor, as the room was absent of furniture. There was nothing left for Lawrence to do but wait in silent agony. The sedative had left him unconscious for hours. Everything about him felt different. He could see better, even in complete darkness. He could hear farther, even when there was nothing around him. And in turn, he heard things. He could smell things he had never even smelled before. Everything about him was stronger, faster, better. There was no doubt that he had changed, but what would the consequences of these newfound abilities be? Lawrence quickly decided it was better not to know. A slit at the bottom of the door opened, and a tray of food was thrown into the cell. Lawrence quickly scrambled over to it, preparing himself for the first bits of food he had eaten in days. After all, food was hard to come by in his... The food that laid before him was a nasty mess of water and mashed vitamins. Lawrence looked at it cautiously. Then, slowly, he bent down next to it and devoured the horrid-tasting plate of food. Then he crawled to the wall of the cell and sat with his back up against it, allowing his body time to digest the food. As he sat there, Lawrence found there were many intense thoughts in his head, as he had to figure out a solution to the predicament that he had gotten himself into. There was no escape from these people. Nothing he had done in life could have prepared him for what stood on the outside of this very cell. He sat alone in absolute silence for the longest time, letting his thoughts overtake him. There was a time when Lawrence felt a large amount of pain run up through his spinal cord, causing him to curl into the fetal position. He cried ferociously out in pain for the first time since the virus had attacked his community a month or so ago. There was a strange feeling inside of him. It made his skin cringe and curl, and his body ache and crawl. It made everything about him feel cold and unending. Inside there was a truth that had to be revealed. Lawrence felt the lies from before and swore he had nothing left. Lawrence stood up and looked at the door. The walls were semi-reflective, allowing him to see portions of himself in them. Quickly he looked into the walls and thought, just for a moment, that his eyes turned orange, shining like a cat's. When he blinked, the blue returned, puzzling Lawrence's thoughts. There was no doubt about it at this point. This odd and peculiar place had changed him, and now he could tell that he was no longer human. A guard opened the door to Lawrence's cell. The man grabbed Lawrence by the scruff of his hair, forcefully placing handcuffs on him. There was no speaking, only movement. The hallway that they walked down was black, stone, and cold. The guard led him straight down the hallway, passing by many groups of cells, all of which contained red X's on the doors. They turned down a corridor that ended in double doors. The guard led him up to the double doors, and Lawrence noticed they were sealed by an extensive new metal device, so that only a code could open them. From Lawrence's perspective, they were the same strange alloy from the chair, and extremely thick. The man entered a code on the side panel. He then opened the door on the left, and led Lawrence through carefully, not letting it close by holding it with his back. The hallway was gray and flooded with immense light. The guard stopped and yanked at the chains binding Lawrence. He put a key into the locks and took off the chains vigorously, allowing Lawrence to rub his beet red wrists. Lawrence turned to look at him, confused. "You have exactly 27 minutes. Begin." The guard turned and closed the door behind him, while he waited until he heard them lock on the other side. The gray hallway stared at him, the door surely locked, showing there was no exit for Lawrence. He stood looking out, finding 7 hallways branching off from the main hallway he was located in. Deep in the back of his mind, Lawrence immediately understood that they were testing him like a student in a classroom. However, he was still a little hazy on what would happen if he failed to complete the maze. He stood for a moment, studying the maze, before taking off down the nearest corridor. The hallway twisted and turned around and around, spinning Lawrence up and down. He was forced through tight spaces, then out again, twisting back and around. He finally found an end to the corridor and sprinted toward it with all of his might. Unfortunately for Lawrence, there was no difference between where he had ended and where he had started, except somehow he was certain that he was facing. Lawrence was immersed in perplexity and turned to his right, running to the next hallway. This hallway had the same effect on Lawrence. It took him around and around for several minutes before spitting him back out at where he had started, except on the exact opposite side. Lawrence knew in his own infamous intelligence that there were only 3 hallways left at this point. He did the same as he did last time. He took a left and went to the next hallway down. From there, he ran through the hallway, faster this time, eager to see if the same effect would happen on him. There were several sharp curves this time, along with far steeper hills within the halls themselves. The effort of running ripped away at Lawrence. However, he seemed to be stronger than before. The hallway had an ending. This time it spit Lawrence back out in the same plain hallway. His newfound theory held true. Lawrence popped out of the hallway and, using all of his might, darted to his right, taking the only seemingly different hallway. This one had to lead out of the maze. However, instead of leading him out of the maze, it took him around one long curved hallway that seemed to never end, along with a straight shot that ended in a defeating dead end. He stopped at the side of the dead end. Wondering what had happened, he stared at the dead end with disgust. Lawrence walked back up the curved corner and stopped for a moment. He looked up and noticed the ceiling was coated with the same metal as the jail cell. Somewhere inside of himself he felt the heat of someone watching him. Provoking thought. He thought quickly to himself, disgust covering his face. Lawrence turned around and started sprinting, faster and faster until his legs were bulging with their own might. He wound back down the curve before running into the dipped part of the hallway. The dead end was straight in front of him. He felt the need to beat it down, to rip it from the very face of the earth. There was nothing left. No hope, no chance for his survival. These people wanted his life more than anything else, and Lawrence wasn't going to try and stick around to find out what happened in 27 minutes. His community was dead, and because of it, there was no reason for his life. But somewhere deep down inside, he found the power of survival reach out and pull him through the fire. Lawrence was running as fast as he could. Then, with a startling jump, he leapt into the air, put his shoulder down, and took out the wall that was holding him back from freedom. For a moment, he felt like he had gone through a simple wooden wall, with nearly no studs or supports. Then he opened his eyes, looking at what lay before him. Lawrence was falling quickly into a deep hole, a severe pit of certain death. There was only darkness below him, with the only light coming from the hallway from above. His body felt weightless for a moment, just before hitting the surface below, landing with a thud. Lawrence looked up, and for the first time, he knew that the end had to be near.